Hi, this chapter is talking about language and the brain. It shows how language is represented and processed in the brain. It is about understanding how language is represented and processed in the brain. This is done through neurolinguistics. And neurolinguistics is a branch of psycholinguistics which deals with language and the brain. It is a branch of psycholinguistics which deals with language and the brain. Now, if we talk about the language areas in the brain, we will have different areas. The most important part in areas above the left ear, in which the areas of language lie, in order to describe them in greater detail, we need to look more closely at some of the gray matter in the brain. We'll have two areas. Number one, a Broca's area is the interior speech cortex, or more usually as a Broca's area, named after Paul Broca, a French surgeon who first discovered this area. This area is responsible for motor programming for articulation, which is speech production and morphosyntactic analysis. The second area is called, as we see here, is called Rennicks Area. This one is called, this area is called Rennicks Area. The second area responsible for language. It is called the posterior speech cortex, or Rennicks area, after the German doctor Karl Rennick. It is the area responsible for language comprehension. It is all about comprehension. So if we talk about Broca's area, we can say that it is responsible for speech production. Now, while Rennicks area is responsible for speech comprehension, Now, let's talk about this area, which is almost red, which is called the primary motor cortex. This is an area that generally controls movement of the muscles, all muscles in the body. Among these muscles, moving hands, feet, arms, and so on and so forth. It is here in this place, close to Broca's area, is a part of the motor cortex that controls articulatory muscles of the face, jaws, tongue, and larynx, and all other parts, organs of speech. In this area, it is near to the Broca's area. There is what is called acrote vasculus, which is nerve bundles, whose function is to connect the Broca's area with Rennicks area, broadcast area with Rennicks area. It cannot be seen in this picture. It needs a vertical one or a vertical cut of the brain so that we can see these bundles or these fibers or nerves. So a broadcast area involved in speech production, motor programming for articulation, involved in morphosyntactic analysis, inflection, structural complexity, add grammatical refinements to content words selected in Rennicks area. While Rennicks area essential to language comprehension, as we said, it is involved in selection or evaluation of content words contained in the lexicon. Motor cortex, as we said, it is an area generally controls movement of the muscles for moving hands, feet, arms, etc. It's close to the area which is close to a broadcast area is a part of motor cortex that controls the articulatory muscles of the face, jaws, tongue, and larynx. Fasciculus are nerve bundles whose function is to connect Broca and Rennicks areas. While the cerebral cortex is a 1/4 inch thick membrane covering the brain. It deals with consciousness, thinking, learning, emotions, and language. It constitutes the difference between humans and other animals, not all animals having such membrane. Corpus callosum, which represents a bundle of nerve fibers that connects the brain's right and left hemispheres. It is not like the acrote fasciculus. Acrote fasciculus nerves whose function is to connect the Broca's area to Rennicks area, while corpus callosum, bundle of nerve fibers that connects the brain's right and left hemispheres. Now, localization view. This view can be defined as the belief that specific aspects of linguistic ability have specific locations in the brain. And with the advancement of knowledge, or with the much more evidence scientists or linguisticians have got, then new names or new terms are given to this view. Sometimes the term pathway is given, sometimes electrical circuits, sometimes steam engine, or nowadays sudden release. All these names and terms have been used for the localization view differently from time to time and due to the advancement in this field. Tip of the tongue phenomenon. We have all experienced difficulty on some occasion or some occasions in getting a brain and speech production to work together smoothly. Some days are worse than others, of course. Minor production difficulties of this sort may provide possible clues to how our linguistic knowledge is organized within the brain. So the experience of knowing a word but being unable to access it and bring it to the surface in order to say it. This is called tip of the tongue. This is related to word storage, a matter that indicates that there are some words are easier to retrieve than others. Or it indicates what is called Malapropism, which is a speech error in which one word is used instead of another with a similar beginning and a number of syllables. For example, medication used instead of meditation. And this is highly used in the literary works, especially Shakespearean works. In addition to slips of the tongue, there is slips of the air, slips of the tongue, and slips of the air. Regarding slips of the tongue, there is what is called spoonerism. It is a slip of the tongue in which two parts of words or two words are switched, as in a dog of bad food, which is switched for a bag of dog food. Make a long story short instead of make a long story short. Use the door to open the key instead of use the key to open the door. Although the slips are mostly treated as errors of articulation, however, it has been suggested that they may result from slips of the brain, not slips of the tongue or slips of the as it tries to organize linguistic messages. I mean, the brain tries to organize the linguistic messages, and in this very process, there will be miscompliance between the tongue, which is or which has physical mechanism, and the brain, which has electrical mechanism. Now, slips of is a process or a processing error in which one word or phrase is heard as another, as in hearing a great ape when the utterance was great tape. So this type of error is called slips of Now here it is not the tongue, it is the which slips. Again, it is about the brain and how the brain organizes the linguistic message. Now, since there is a discrepancy sometimes between the impulses sent by the brain and the physical mechanisms accomplished by the organs of speech, then there must be what is called language disorders. Language disorder is a damage to one of these areas, to either Broca's area or Rennicks area, which will affect the ability to produce, perceive language. This damage is always referred to as aphasia. So 3 types of aphasia can be studied in our lecture: Broca's aphasia, Rennicks aphasia, and Conduction aphasia. Let's start with Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasia is a substantially reduced amount of speech distorted articulation, and slow, often effortful speech. Now, if we take this example, it is a good illustrative example for this disorder. Now, the examiner sometimes asks the aphasic like this question: tell me, what did you do before you retired? Aphasic, bartender. So there is some kind of loss in terms of producing speech or articulation. Examiner: carpenter? Aphasic, nodding to signal yes. Carpenter, 20 years. So first, the loss of articulation. He said bartender, while in fact carpenter. So this is the part which is missed or lost. And the loss itself represents what is called speech production. Sometimes broadcast aphasia deals with syntactic disorder. Syntactic disorder. The aphasic or aphasics tend to omit inflectional morphemes, which are necessary for completing the meaning through syntax, like ing, ed, en, s, etc. Now take this example: the boy ate it up. Sometimes the aphasics say the boy ate up it, or boy ate it up. So these two sentences are not grammatical ones. Why? Because the first one needs the arrangement, the right order, and the second one needs the inflectional morpheme, which is the. Okay. Sometimes within the syntactic disorder regarding broadcast aphasia, production of speech, the aphasics tend to interpret two different sentences with the same words as one sentence. For example, the mouse was chased by the cat, and the cat was chased by the mouse. They would interpret these two sentences as one sentence. They give A and B the same interpretation. However, the right understanding or the right interpretation of A and B is driven by syntax, which is different. A is different from B, depending on the syntactic order of words. Now, Rennicks aphasia means the difficulties in auditory comprehension, and sometimes called sensory aphasia, dealing with sensory cells and pulses. Difficulty in finding the correct word, sometimes referred to as anomia. Now, if we take this example: examiner, do you like it here in Kansas City? Aphasic: yes, I am. Examiner: I'd like to have you tell me something about your problem. Aphasic: yes, I can tell all of my way. I can talk all of the things I do. And part I can go alright, but I can't tell from the other people. I usually, most of my things, I know what can I talk and know what they are, but I can't always come back even though I know they should be in, and I know should something I should know what I am doing. So here we can say the difficulty. We can see the difficulty in finding the correct word. You see, in the example, or I mean in the answer of Aphasic, you can see clearly that the Aphasic is losing words, cannot comprehend the question, the first question, and cannot comprehend the second question neither. So he just kept talking and talking and talking incoherent utterances which cannot be dealt with at all. Now the third type of aphasia is called conduction aphasia. Conduction aphasia is a language disorder associated with the damage of acrot fasciculus, in which repeating or pronouncing words or phrases is difficult. For example, to pronounce vas and fosh, the aphasic, conduction aphasic, will pronounce them like this: base and wash. And there are so many examples, and so many language difficulties are included aphasia, such as Alzheimer's disease, which is a relatively new disease. This is one of the most prominent diseases regarding aphasia nowadays. Now let's move to dichotic listening test. This is an experimental technique that has demonstrated left hemisphere dominance for syllable and word processing. It is called dichotic listening test. This technique uses the generally established fact that anything experienced on the right-hand side of the body is processed in the left hemisphere of the brain, and anything on the left side is processed in the right hemisphere of the brain. So two different stimuli are presented simultaneously through earphones to the left and right ears. The listeners are asked to say what they hear. This is the experiment. Let's see what they hear. It's about counterlateralization. The connection between the brain and the body are almost completely counterlateral. How? If we take the right ear advantage, we will find out that non-linguistic sound processing is going to be more adequately when presented to the right ear. And listener can identify linguistic stimuli more accurately when presented to the right ear. I should say right ear, not I should say linguistic stimuli more accurately when presented to the right ear. And non-linguistic sound processing is more accurately when presented to the left ear. So here, left ear is non-linguistic sound processing, while right ear is the language processing. Now, the last thing in this lecture is about the critical period. Critical period is the period when the human brain is most ready to receive input and learn a particular language. This is sometimes called the sensitive period for language acquisition, but is more generally known as the critical period. Although sometimes it is proved that this period is not the exact age or the exact period of acquiring a language. It might be before and it might be after this period that any human being can acquire any type of language. Lateralization or lateralized, it is that the brain is divided into left side and right side, or left hemisphere and right hemisphere, with control of functions on one side or the other used in describing the human brain. So whatever, as we said, whatever done in the right hemisphere, in the right part of the body, will be processed in the left hemisphere of the brain, and whatever is done in the left side of the body will be processed in the right hemisphere, except the language, which is, as we said, dichotic listening test. All the linguistic items or linguistic processing will be better understood when processed in the right hemisphere, or in the when it is processed through the right hemisphere. I mean through the right air in the left hemisphere. That's all for this lecture, and I would recommend that study questions are so important. And thank you for listening. This is Mr. Bاسم Jubir from the Islamic University College, Department of English, giving general course in general linguistics, 4th year students. Thank you very much.